Hello, and welcome to another episode of the SENDhelp Podcast. And today I've got Jess from Grove, and I am going to not butcher what she does in the intro like normal. I'm going to pass over to her to do that. But today we're just going to be talking about, well, there's not really one thing, just Sen in general, I suppose. We'll start with what Jess does and like how amazing it is at a Grove community and the stuff she's growing, and kind of go up there from what we kind of figure out, I suppose. That wasn't much of direction, but yeah, it'll be good. But yeah, anyway, I'll hand over to Jess and she can explain kind of her background and company and where she's from and all of that.
Brilliant. Thank you. You said to me just before we started that we're going to have awkward intro, and I'm awkward in them as well. So hi, everybody. Yeah, so it's all good. It doesn't matter. Thanks ever so much for watching, and it's super nice to be here with you, Nathan. Thanks so much for inviting me on. So I'm Jess. I wear lots of different hats, I guess, in life. First and foremost, I am a mum to two neurodivergent young people. I've got a 10-year-old who is autistic, ADHD, PDA, who sadly crashed and burned out of school age 6 and has not been able to access education since. I expect we'll have a chat about that, shall we? See how that will. So I share experiences as a family, as a mum, with many of the young people's families who we support through Grove. I've also got a 6-year-old who is my wild little ADHD who I say that two beautiful kids and all the challenges that come with neurodivergent parenting. Through my first child's identification, I learned that I am also autistic ADHD, so I've known that for a number of years, and that's become a big part of my life, as will happen with many people when they become kind of late realised neurodivergent people. We like to deep dive, and so it quite quickly became my special interest, the area of neurodiversity, neurodivergence, autism in particular. So with that, I did sort of two things, really. I did a master's in autism, focused all of my work on children and young people's experiences, and I also set up Grove. So Grove, in a nutshell, Grove is an online community for autistic young people and children by autistic adults. And what we, I guess, are hoping to do through the things that we do at Grove is to give young people access to up-to-date neuro-affirming information about neurodiversity, about autism in particular, and also give them a place where they can belong and they can connect with other autistic children and all the other autistic adults as well. And we do that through three main things. So we do one-to-one mentoring, and we do interest-based groups, which are just really a place for coming together over, something that the children all love and having some fun together. And then we also have a program called Being Me, which is a more structured way of exploring what autism actually is and giving young people a chance to explore what that means to them. So rather than us sort of saying, you need to believe this, think this and this, it's about us sharing, that information with them so they can come to their own conclusions. And that came to light really from what my 10-year-old was asking for when he was really little. He wanted other children or other autistic children. Like he said to me, where are they? Oh, mummy, I want to meet them. And I couldn't really find a way that worked for him, and then realised lots of people were saying the same thing, and he wanted to understand what autism meant. And again, I couldn't really find anything that was kind of geared up for children, but also was fully affirming. I used to be a teacher. I had to crash and burn out of that as well, because kiddo couldn't go to school anymore. So we had to kind of start life all over again, and that kind of brings us to now and talking to you.
Yeah. No, that's amazing.
At all. I'm rubbish at explaining things really quickly. Nathan,
no. I think, that's quite really good. That shows, but again, as I said, Zen parenting is the forefront of it all, isn't it? And it kind of drives us to do the things in the second hand because of it. And I think ultimately in your story is that you was a teacher and then had to come down from that for SEN purposes for your child, I take it.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't go to work, like he was tiny and, obviously couldn't be at home on his own. We managed for a little while to have my other half at home working, but we couldn't carry on in that way. But also I couldn't just stop work, so we couldn't afford to pay the mortgage. Things changed, and I shared this with you before, and I've always been quite open about this. Things changed when my mum passed away, about 6 months into that difficult journey, and although I wish it wasn't the thing that sort of set us free, it did, because she left us her, life savings. She was a school teacher as well, so we're not talking, a huge amount of money here, but enough to make us not fear losing a house and being able to look at what Grove could become, which was a team. It needed to be a team. It needed to be far more than just me for it to ever really have the impact for the young people. So so we've got a team of 15 autistic adults working together now, and I'm grateful every day to my mum's life leading to that happening.
Mm. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Should be
15
proud.
people as well. That's no small feat. That's shows you the need though, doesn't it? And yeah, I mean, what are you finding? So the similarities that you probably find across the board at the normal SEN issues, isn't it? But with the parents, what is it that you're finding they're struggling with the most?
Oh God, schools, without a
Yeah,
doubt, like
just all turned down, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah. So, I wish that we could get to a point in life and at Grove where we did not have to try and fix young people's harm to their, real core sense of self
Mhm.
and their self-esteem, because it's been so damaged by society, and because of, us working with children and young people. Sadly, predominantly that harm is coming from schools for lots of different reasons. And I also, having been a teacher, I recognise the tensions and the challenges that our teaching community and our education professionals have. I get all that, but it's harming children and young
Yeah,
people.
this is what I mean.
There's no
It kind of
argument
when you
over that.
put that in front of it, it does it. And again, like every job has their issues, doesn't it? Their mental health team has to fund it, and issues, blah blah, across the board. But when you realise the damage it's doing to these children, it's just words. And this is why I think that the people think that I hate teachers, but I don't. Again, if the second half of all my videos always say how teachers are the ones who change their life, but it's when I don't think they realise that. I don't think that some teachers and some organisations realise that I think that it's easier to not believe that situation. They're like, if I was in that, if I
Yeah,
was getting, it's almost ignorance is bliss, isn't it? And if you don't believe that you're doing that to a child, I think if you took that home that was affecting the child to that level, you wouldn't be able to cope. So I think
yeah,
a bit of it's like that, but ultimately, it's just open your eyes. The kids are there,
yeah,
like, and I'm sick of seeing them suffer. And from school, it's awful.
yeah, yeah. It's a really layered and nuanced, difficult thing, isn't it? The
Mm,
situation with education, because I think you're absolutely right that there are a lot of education staff who just don't know it, and
mm,
I, to an extent, was one of them when I was in it. I was a disruptor at school. I was kind of pretty much
mm.
always in trouble with management because I was trying to do things differently and that sort of thing. And I kind of knew and a lot of teachers will use that phrase, the system's broken, and it sort of
Yeah.
detaches it from that individual in a sense, doesn't it? But, I think that there's a layer of knowledge, but I don't think it goes as deeply as when you've lived it, in your own
Oh, never.
household.
Yeah.
Because then you really see, genuinely you see the impact that environment can have for those young people. And I don't believe, and I have to hold on to this belief, I don't believe that there are any education staff who go into that role with anything other than the best intentions to want to change lives for the better, to want for children to thrive. And I think, like you said, it would be really, really hard to accept that not only is that not happening a lot, but actually the opposite is happening. Actual true harm is
Yeah.
happening. And to accept that, but also then feel perhaps powerless to do anything about that, gosh, that's a
Awful.
really tough place.
And it's almost like if you're a good-hearted teacher and you know that you're making these adjustments for the kids anyway, and then it's almost like I just had a podcast earlier about this sort of, and it's like you don't then want to leave because you know that what would your replacement be? Someone that is going to go by the rules and then let the kid that's just hanging on actually go.
Yeah,
I would hate to think it's solely because of the money of the job, because again, teaching is very staffed at the moment. So I would think you could just go to another job. So I'd hate to think they hang on
yeah,
just because they're scared, because I wouldn't think that's morally right. But I do
mm,
think that it is a bit like, okay, but I've got, because that teacher would have gone to raise the complaints or tried to make the changes and it got stopped. So they've already tried. And then they're like, okay, well, if I put someone else in, or they look at the other teachers and think, well, if they're going to do it, then they're not going to have a chance. And
yeah,
I
yeah,
think people don't realize, remember as well, that these teachers, one teacher is not really going to do much because it's 1 year of that kid's life. And
Yeah.
if you're talking about a school year training, it has to be across the board. It has to be a school ethos. So even if
Mhm.
9 times out of 10 the teachers are great, you're going to get stuck somewhere, like a head
Yeah.
teacher or a
Yeah.
management or somewhere where it goes not about the SEN or the
Yeah.
kids' need, it goes
Yeah.
about statistic.
That's it. Absolutely. I mean, I think the thing is that as an individual teacher, you're beholden to the policies that are in place in the wider school and
Mhm.
you're accountable to those. And so you are, measured on how you apply those policies. So you can wholeheartedly disagree with them. So, think like, let's take, really strict behaviour policies, for
Mhm.
instance. You can know in your heart that that is not helping, that you don't want to do it, but you can also have to do it because you risk your job if you don't,
Yeah.
adhere to policy. So it's a really, really, really hard place to be, I think, for those teachers who do see that tension. And kind of looping back to what you asked me originally, which is what am I seeing with families that come to us, is I'm seeing kids who are completely burnt out,
Yeah.
who are so isolated and, often physically unable to leave their room, leave their house, leave the side of their safe person because their nervous system has been so overloaded and they have become so completely hypervigilant because of what they've been through that they are really, really super struggling. And gosh, I wish that we just did not push kids to that point. But, at this stage, I accept that there is very, very little that we as a team in Grove can do to influence making that better. Obviously we'd love to be able to do that. But I guess I want families to know that there are options of this kind of support. I'm not saying that we can pull kids out of burnout. That's not, that's an unrealistic expectation, but we can start to show young people that they have a place in the world as their authentic selves, that they are
Yeah.
valuable and they are loved as their authentic selves. They do not have to change in order to be of value in the world,
No. And that's powerful. That's means £1,000,000 to any that kind of thought process about it is amazing to have, because we do see these kids get told from the very get-go what they can and can't do by people that are not ourselves as their parents, by people that are in charge of, like, we're not in charge of them, but pretty much are in charge of them, and directing them to tell them basically they're not doing this. And it's just a constant, "No, you can't. No, you can't." And I think that it stops you from even looking in it. Me, myself, I wouldn't look in until I got, I don't know, late to 20s, and it was still an accident how I got into the position I got into. I would never have had self-belief that I could
Yeah.
have got into that position. It because naturally I just, "Oh, I'm quite good at this. Oh, maybe I can do this." But through the learn I had to unlearn school in the sense of everything that I learned that I wasn't good at actually doesn't matter, because
Yeah.
you can put it into use somewhere else, or that doesn't actually have an effect. So you should. So what that's done, it knocks your ability, like it knocks your self-esteem, it knocks you looking inwards about your what you can achieve. And that's even worse than putting someone down when afterwards. So like, number of people get that when they get in bad relationships and they get put down. When you're developing and you don't think there's any other choice to look at, that is awful. Because you
Yeah.
wouldn't even think there's an alternative. You wouldn't even think I could have. You don't even look to see that's an issue.
Yeah. And I think there's again, and I wish it didn't have to have this perspective, but there's healing to be found in connecting with people with similar lived
Yeah.
experiences to you, and
Mhm.
there's healing to be found in connecting with people with the same or similar neurotype and, people who sense in similar ways, people who communicate in similar ways, people who think and process and use attentional resources in similar ways, that you're not the only one, for children. And I think in particular that those teenage years, it can be so, so difficult to feel different, and to feel like you stick out. And there's so many young people who I work with and have met over the years will not, for example, accept accommodations and supports at school for fear of being noticed to be different.
Yeah.
And what does that tell us about culture, about society's culture, about school culture, that you can't give yourself, your body, your mind, what it needs for fear of being perceived to be different?
And it's almost like that's encouraged, isn't it, in
Yeah.
schools? I don't think they'll do much to prevent that. I think that's something they're going to be like, well, they asked for it. They're hanging out to
Yes.
dry now. It's almost
Because
like the
compliance,
punishment.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Schools are all about compliance and, we've got to get through all the stuff really quickly and there's so much to do and we're accountable to that. And so we've got these kids who just have got to do what they're told right now because otherwise we're
yeah.
going to run out of time and it's so hard.
It shouldn't be like that. There should be more. There's things that always baffles me as well, because it's almost like I think they think that we need, there is an overhaul that needs to be done. But when it comes to like lessons and stuff, everything that we kind of know would work doesn't necessarily mean it's specific like that. So it has to be a one-to-one. It could be something that's opened up to a classroom that
Yeah.
most kids would benefit from. And then that takes the stigma out of having someone attached to you. So if you've done it correctly, it wouldn't matter and you wouldn't stand out. So even the fact they're saying, yeah, we're going to do it, but they might stand out. That's worrying too, because it's like
Yeah.
that should be part of your thought process. If instead of having 5 kids that stand out, how do I get these 5 kids not to stand out? That should be the whole
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. How do we create a culture of
Subtle support, isn't it?
celebrating
Like, how do I do
diversity?
it subtly to not make attention to it? That should be it. Just
Yeah.
little things, isn't it? Not
So
massive, huge things.
when I was teaching, so I was a drama teacher predominantly. I started as an English teacher and kind of hated having to make kids sit down and write and read for ages when they didn't want to be doing that. So I moved into drama and I enjoyed the freedom of that. I know it doesn't work for everybody. Absolutely understand that. And I made a lot of mistakes as a teacher. I'm not here saying I was in any way like perfect teacher. My goodness, I look back on my career and I think, had I have known better, there's so much that I would have done differently, so much that I deeply regret because I know now and I can see now. But just as an example, I'm just going to use fidgets because I'm sitting here fidgeting. Fidgets are a tool, right? They're a tiny tool and, they're not going to fix the world. But just for an example, with my classes, we just had a box of them available for anybody, and we had some, and we co-created this with the young people. We had some very specific kind of needs, so we didn't call them rules, but the specific needs so that we made sure that they were being used sensibly and safely, So I remember one class in particular, we came up with once you've picked one, we're not swapping around. And because they knew that then would just cause chaos. So they came up with that. And the other thing was we're not throwing them because we can hit somebody in the eye, And I was like, yeah, fair enough. Let's go with that. And we just had them constantly available. And, the novelty to start with, it was a bit like, I'm not sure how this is going to go. But in the end, it was just a thing that we had and anybody used them. And that expanded into sit how you want. How's your body feel comfortable?
Yeah.
Do you want to look at me when I'm talking? If you don't, that's fine. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to judge you based on how you're externally presenting. Now, that absolutely cause some problems because when you have things, so I don't know whether you've ever come across this phrase called learning walks, when the management, they'll just wander around and they'll just pop in your classroom and they'll observe for a little while and you're being judged as a teacher. And when they don't see what they've come to expect as being their standards, then obviously there's questions. But I was always able to evidence, we don't have behaviour problems in this class. We don't have people who are going to the loo and then disappearing because I just let them go when they want to and when they need to, rather than trying to insist that they only go at certain times of the day, And if they do vanish, then I'm going to talk to them about what's going on and why did they feel like they needed to be out of the room for so long? What can I do to help you with that? Okay, because I need to know that you're safe as much as anything. So there are so many things. I know that there's more training needed. I know that I know there's been announcements about training happening, but it always begs the question, who's doing the training and what kind of things are they training on? Because frankly, there's not many people out there who I would trust, particularly with autism training, to be doing this on a national level. My goodness.
That's it, because companies like myself and you, I don't know if you've done it, but I did personally reach out to all the schools. I know loads of people have reached out to the schools. The companies that could help, they're still, and it doesn't come down to teachers. So I'm sure the teachers would bite their hand off and probably are pissed off that they didn't know that the people had been offering to go into the classroom. The more people I'm talking to, what I'm realising is you're right about the teachers and there being multi-layered issues. Where there doesn't seem to be much issues and it seems to be deliberate is on the head teacher upwards.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more power. There's a lot more power to influence policy and procedure in senior leadership team than people realise. I think a lot of the time it gets passed up to government again. And that is problematic in the sense that obviously there's Ofsted, there are, if you're still within local authority or you might be within a trust and you have those accountable. So there's often layers above, but there's a huge amount more influence in senior leadership team than perhaps people realise. And
I think
they can affect a lot of change if they want to.
Okay, I might be able to say that as you've been a teacher. So there is it's like a cult. It's the only way I can describe it, people, is when you're a teacher, there's like a shadowing body above you that is kind of minuscule and above you, and any kind of mistake or any kind of, again, so the reciprocated of behaviour policy and stuff like that, teachers would be sent out to go do punishments on kids. And if they didn't do the punishment on the kids and thought that was a bit harsh, then they would be in punishment themselves.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it works. And also, schools are also tied into the same complaint policy as us. So where we think we can't complain against a head teacher, they definitely can't complain against a head teacher, even with a union. So it's really hard to think, but again, it's just this whole shadow society above a teacher, isn't it? The way it's run as a business is the stubbornness of what we need to reciprocate. And it's the gap between the teachers who are in the middle of that, and you've got the head teachers that are like, no, it's business, we need to do this and budgets and blah, blah, blah. And you've got parents like, that's not realistic. You can't just keep ignoring our children.
Yeah. It's really hard, and I often you've hit the nail on the head there for me in the sense that often what happens is that the teachers that are there on the sort of the front line with the children and the young people are often subject to the same behavioural practices from their management team as they're expecting those teachers to enact on the children. It's a real draconian, like, behaviourist system. For me, like, there are so many policies and procedures and practices that could change. For me, I'm really interested, I guess, in trying to get to the bottom of, like, what do people believe, what forms attitudes and belief systems, and the problem for me often comes down to that behaviourist belief that you can manipulate and you can change how other people outwardly behave in order for them. And this often happens in particular, I think, with our autistic students, in order to see if you can try and mould them into being acceptable in society, and this belief that we're kind of crafting and creating children that will go off into the real world. Well, I don't know any other place.
That's the real world, that according to them, which is not actually the real world.
No, and it's nothing like being in a school is I don't think in any way like the actual real world. So I don't believe that.
In some ways, the bits like that bullying and the physical fights and stuff, it's worse because, again, it comes back to real world, but it's over the top. Like, do you know what I mean? So it is. It's not. There's bits of it that are good about it, but you can't just say in this world, what are they prepping them for? It's literally nothing. Because they're not factory workers anymore. They're not meant to sit still. And it's hard to see it, apart from it being a massive ego sort of / misogynistic power trip, that these kids are not just getting told to do these things when it's not effective. Because the definition of a punishment, again, of discipline, is to change the outcome of the behaviour, basically, isn't it? So that they don't do it again. If you've got to tell someone off and give them attention every day for losing a pen, you're doing nothing. You're gaining nothing from even a disciplined approach from that. It's only because I said so and you didn't do it. And it's like, if it begs the question, if a kid's losing his pen every single day and you're disciplining him every single day, sending him to detention, and you're not still, then you're not yourself going, he might have ADHD, and you're still taking that as a personal attack against yourself, deliberately going against, or she's deliberately going out their way to lose their pen to get to detention. That is crazy thought process. How did that happen?
Yeah, you're right. And it's funny, because before you said about the pen, I was literally thinking about, like people forgetting their pen. Honestly, the pen thing is ridiculous. Just give them the sodding pen. And I used to just have secret little packs of stationery that I would just give my like the kids who would be in my form, when you're supposed to check their equipment, I'd just be like, you're not got it, that's right, just have it.
I mean, what is this?
I can get it back. It's really not a big deal. And we removed the thing altogether in drama, in that we just said, right, we don't want you to have your equipment, you're just going to use ours. But it doesn't, like, punishment, it just doesn't solve what the issue is. There's a reason that child is not bringing a pen every day. Now, we don't know that could be all sorts of different reasons. It absolutely could be executive functioning. It could be something that's really difficult at home, we don't know. But it takes that time and curiosity, doesn't it, to try and understand what's going on for those kids and then to try and support and help and scaffold that. So we're looking at, we don't want them to be able to not go out into the workplace and be equipped to learn and equipped to work and all that. Well, I tell you honestly, Nathan, the amount of staff training that I've done where the teachers don't turn up with pens, and it's just like, you can't go around punishing children all day long for not bringing a pen. You're not brought one yourself.
Yeah.
Honestly, it can get really ridiculous. And that's where, as a teacher, you have got the power to influence that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Just to have some spare pens, for goodness sake.
Yeah. Yeah. It's mad, isn't it?
It is mad. It is mad. And then you and I, and places like SENDhelp and Grove and all the other amazing kind of fringe services, I guess, what we're just trying to do is try and make kids who are stuck in that system or have fallen out of that system because they cannot be in it any longer, just make something in their life a little bit better whilst we're waiting for this massive overhaul in a system that's probably never going to come if we're realistic about it. All we can do is try and make these little moments of safety, these little glimmers, these little times where children, young people and the families can be held in a safe space instead.
It's absolutely true. And I just hope that we don't do such a good job that, actually, I don't know, maybe I do hope that we do such a good job that they realise there's no point going to school. Because if you think about how many setups are done, the more we do that and the more we're having to do that outside of a school setting, it just proves the school setting's not safe. So then it begs the question of, if they're going to get more effective from being in a class that's not teaching them English and maths and just teaching them what autism is, it does put the question back at the school, isn't it? Then and maybe that would be something that means they care, because when they're losing people with attendance, people even signing up to schools because there's alternative. At the moment, we're taking them out. It's a lot of they're starting in school and taking them out. What happens next generation before, when they just don't even trust the schools to send them in?
Yeah. And I think, obviously we're waiting to see what the government's going to release in the Send white paper and all sorts. And there's
I already know what it is. I've been telling people for 2 years. Now I say it's not so much, but people thought I was a conspiracy theorist saying from the beginning. But I heard I can't remember who probably now I do, but I'm not going to tell you. But I got this bit of information, and it was something that I was like, that makes so much sense. And I've been going with that throughout this whole narrative. I've been saying this whole thing, and it seems to be coming to light that they're saying it now. But this whole fund is a smokescreen. So what I was aware of last year was, in 2 years' time, so we've got about another year and a bit left, they are stopping EHCPs. So because of the money and the finances and the money that has to come with it, because they made a mistake, they underthought what it was going to be was good when there's one kid, but not for 5. So they're changing the system for that. In the meantime, they're shutting down the way that people go to special schools. So if you don't have an EHCP or whatever's going to be equivalent to it, you're not going to get into a specialist school. And they want every kid going into mainstream school with an SEN hub, which is great. And this is what they're saying the funding for and the millions. I can't help but see that that's going to be used as segregation. As a way to segregate these kids so they don't have to learn. It's not going to be used as a mixed class. It's not going to be used as a quiet area that everyone can use it. It's a way of them now not being responsible by funding to pay for these kids being in a place, and now being justified to say, oh yeah, we've got a space that's committed just for them, and then do the bare minimum training to pass it. So I think the actual problem is going to be 10 decades before it changes. This is a step in the right direction by accident, because it is going to make them aware about SEN kids. They can't hide them away to a certain degree. They might be in a class. But I think throughout the narrative I've known that seems to still be aligning. This white paper seems to be the smokescreen, and what they're going to promise is all this funding, which actually just means units, like 3 units for these kids in these mainstream schools, which then stops them getting access to a specialist provision.
Gosh, I mean, I think it's going to get a lot worse, isn't it? Before it gets better. And, I have full respect for the people out there who are sort of campaigning and trying to push for this to be different. And I mean, it's scary. I mean, we are very privileged. I recognise our privilege as a family in the sense that for our 10-year-old now who never will be able to access school as it is, we have been able to find a really nurturing, safe, nervous system safe is what I'm talking about here. Safe alternative provision. I mean, we're having to pay for the whole thing ourselves, as a family. But I get the privilege of being able to do that. A lot of people just do not.
It's not even a practice. That should be just provided in the national care. Alternative provision just sounds like something that's needed now, an alternative to the mainstream provision. And it's another thing that baffles me against the government, because they're letting this happen, where they're letting they know, they're seeing companies do it. Alternative provisions, forest schools, they're all doing it up, and they're not supporting them, and they're letting them have to finance it themselves, which is then costing parents
Yeah.
money, and then it's too much money. They're saying, "Oh, we're not paying for that." And it's just like they're out there, their schools are there, and you're not working together to collaborate to see how we can funnel these people that are in the setting to these schools. Because again, it's just almost like if we don't do it, it's not real. So if they're not the one to say it or change it, it's not a real practice, and this is all like hippie behaviour. If it doesn't come from the government, isn't it? Like this is all,
Yeah.
this doesn't work. Trust me.
Yeah. I know a lot of people who are running like APs, and I wouldn't. So Grove, we're not. I guess we're not an AP, although we tend to like kind of access alternative provision funding through young people's EHCPs. We're not technically known as an AP, but I know a lot of people who run APs. I don't think there's anybody who I can count who went into that with a business head and thought this is something where
No.
I'm going to be able to make money and like that. They go into it because they believe in trying to make something different for children and young people because they see the problems. They've lived those problems, that has been created for, whether it's their own family or, just kids that they work with that they care about. It comes from a place of love. It's really heart-led, people trying to make a difference. And it is definitely getting and probably going to get harder with changes for those people. And I have no doubt that there will be APs that will have to close and all sorts of kind of provisions that are used for home educating children with rules that are going to come in with that.
Yeah.
It's
They've
absolutely
got to do something, haven't they? Because I think that's another thing that I haven't even really thought about. But they're going to have to do something about the crisis of people coming out of school. So that's a way of doing it, isn't it? By shutting down any alternative placement they can go to,
and
or
by
make it
forcing
very
people back
difficult.
in. Yeah. I mean, realistically though, with the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of young people who are home educated, there's not enough physical spaces in schools. They talk about
No.
schools being, not only do I fundamentally disagree that schools are the best place to learn, they're just not. Actually, they're not safe for a lot of young people, and this response of like not being able to go to school most of the time is because for that young person, it is not a psychologically and emotionally safe place to be. For some of them, it's not physically a safe place to be. So forcing them in, an exposure anxiety kind of way where we're just going to get used to all of this distress. Well, no, for a start, no. But also, if we were going to say, right, home education is now illegal, where on earth are all these children going to go? Because there is not enough room.
And this is, what you're going to do about it, because you're already, it's almost like you're, at the same time, it's a double-handed, what I've seen, especially for the media as well, is they're attacking this both ways. So in one sentence, they're saying homeschooling is bad, and where kids taking them out, there's been an increase in, obviously it's not good, socialising and blah, 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 so it's a bad thing to do and don't do it. But then their actions in the school is that they any kid with SEN, they make that an option very quickly and very accessible, and even push sometimes to make that an option. It's almost like it's like, what way do you want it?
Yeah.
I don't even, that's what makes me uncomfortable.
And honestly, this whole line about home education and not being social is
Is your kid happy? That's what you got to ask. Are they happy?
Yeah, it's complete crap. Because I would say, without a doubt, having kind of been in both of those approaches in life, that home educated children, when they are feeling happy and safe and in an environment where it works for them, far more social as their authentic selves. When you're in school, socialising is very tightly controlled. Doesn't happen during lessons, okay, because you're told how you're allowed to communicate and interact with people around you. You get the shortest break and lunch, ever. So factor in trying to get through a horrendous queue in a hall to be able to go and get some food in the space of 35 minutes, which can often be the case. That's not a time to be social anyway. So we might have young people in a school setting for 6 hours. Realistically, in that day, honestly, there's probably 15, 20 minutes of that for socialising. Whereas with home educated children, far more opportunity and loads of diverse interaction across age groups, in different locations through different activities. I just think it's an absolute useless argument.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. I never thought about that. That's a brilliant way. Yeah. No,
Yeah, it's
that
just
is a
not
great.
true. Like, it's just absolutely categorically not true. That is the line of
See, I
argument.
never thought of
It's
school
just not
that
true.
restricted. Yeah, because you do, and I
It's
kind of,
so
even me now,
controlling.
I'm thinking, did I believe that? Did I believe that when you're taking it away? But yeah, because you
Mm,
do, you think that, oh yeah, because the school socialising, they're going to be socialising, meeting their mates. But then, yeah, you're told not to
no,
socialise the whole time you're there.
100%. And if you think, even if like you think, well, I'm going to take secondary because I worked in secondary, so that's the environment I lived in for 17 years. Think about kids just moving from one lesson to the next, through hallways, and you've got so many schools who will so tightly control
Yeah.
which way they're allowed to walk, what they're allowed to wear. I know that's irrelevant to socialising, but still, coat on, coat off, whatever. Whether they are even allowed to talk, silent corridors are a real thing in secondary schools.
Oh, 100%.
Even that time. So if I'm not a maths person, but you only really need to look at the numbers of how many minutes in the day we are actually giving those children to socialise. It's
And you
virtually
know the maddest
nothing.
thing is, they probably come home, go on the Xbox or whatever, and socialise more than they did in school in the next
100%.
hour, just being on the Xbox at home, away from everything, not even lying.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And and schools, if I was trying to kind of anticipate counter arguments. Okay, so they might throw back something like, well, what about all the clubs we do? Brilliant, keep doing those
Once a
clubs because
month.
they're such important things. Okay, absolutely do them. Is that not very similar to the sort of thing that home educated children can access at any time throughout the
Yeah.
week and day?
Yeah.
Because so actually what we're
Literally.
saying is clubs where children could come together and just explore things they enjoy. They're really good for socialising, very similar to what home educated
Yeah.
children do.
Yeah.
Or have the opportunity to do a lot of, predominantly because of so many wonderful parents and carers and ex kind of education staff and all sorts of other people who are setting up things that children who aren't at school for whatever reason can access. And yet we're going to restrict that and make that more difficult. I don't
Yeah,
think that
I
any of this
know.
is putting those kids at the heart of what's best for them. I really
It
don't.
is. It's very, and I think it's good to see that we're aligned in that. Actually, it's good to up that we are doing God's work in a way. Because I just can't. I think most people would do it. I think it's not the sense that we're just privileged in the sense that we've been able to, isn't it? Like I think most parents would do what we're doing. And it's just, as I said, giving them an alternative placement to do that. I'm very early doors. I said I had my first meet and greet on the app with all the kids because I'm starting to show these. And when I say kids classes, I say it's not meant to replace school or even do anything with school. This is, I just want them to have a purpose. So instead of just
Yeah.
sitting there rotting and doing anything, I'm not so much about like, I'll add to that. I said I could get teaching now to have something that wants to offer, but it's just
Yeah.
kind of basically what you're saying that why you started it. It's just having a place where they know that they can come and speak to people that are not going to judge. And if everybody in that place has a neurodiversity, it's probably the first time in their life they've been in a room full of people with neurodiversity, that are adults and children, like
Yeah.
in a structured setting. Obviously at home, maybe the parents might be diagnosed, but in a
Yeah.
actual, or even if they have, it's the first time that the adults have said to them, oh,
Yeah.
we're like an older version of you. And just saying that or getting that community, just doing that, I think I always try and think a bit of what I would have needed when because I got diagnosed at 11, so it's very secluded then as well. But what would have helped me, and what did help me was the people that I did come across that were adults that were like more towards where when I was older, that, oh yeah, I've got that.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got that. And it's almost like it gives you a peace of mind, like, oh, he understands or she understands.
Yeah.
And just
Yeah.
like that is all we can kind of start to offer our children is relatability and a voice really, and a way to be them, as you very good you pointed out earlier, the first time that they're probably being able to be their full self in an environment,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
incredible.
It is so important, isn't it? I really do feel like that community connection, however feels accessible for that child. So that community connection can come through, reading books with neurodivergent characters. It can be films, it can be TV, it can be real life clubs, it can be online things. It's kind of anything that gives that child access to some kind of representation beyond their own experience, where they see aspects of themselves in mirror and they can see that they're not alone, and I guess that for me, massive core part of what we do at Grove with the mentoring in particular is showing young people that they really truly are not the only ones to go through life experiencing, sensing, communicating, behaving, in these ways. They obviously are their own beautiful, wonderful, unique person, but probably don't feel that way about themselves right now. But if we can give them access to role models and community members and neurokin, I think that's so valuable. And for me as well, the added layer to that was that young people are going to come across, whether they know it or not, they're going to come across people who share neurotype with them all over the place. What we wanted to do at Grove is to give access to people who really deeply understand, know, have studied, not necessarily through formal qualification, because to expect just that, I think, is frankly ableist, because that's not accessible to a lot of autistic people. But people for whom autism, neurodiversity is their dedicated, passionate interest. So they have studied, they live and breathe that world, so that what we can do is spot opportunities for those young people to give them language and frameworks to be able to start to understand themselves, to be able to reframe some of their self-stigma, be able to gently over time to, give them different perspectives of how they can embrace who they are, in their wonderful, intersectional, multiple kind of ways of living in the world. And I think that's desperately important. So I think every kid out there across the world should have access to a mentor. I really, truly believe that autistic kids should have access to an autistic mentor who has studied autism, because frankly, people who haven't studied it have often done a huge amount of harm, or have studied in out-of-date theory and out-of-date practice, and we're still trying. I read so many EHCPs, Nathan, parents coming to me saying, well, can you write to say what Grove can do? And I look at these and I get my head in my hands thinking, how many professionals has had contact with this kid who has read that this kid lacks theory of mind, that they need to develop their social skills, that they can't do this, that they're rubbish at that, that their whole humanity is stripped away in this piece of paper. And in the end, then what we have often is tutors, teachers, TAs, or other professionals working with those children using interventions and approaches that we now know are harmful, but because the people who have input into that EHCP have not done the work to update their knowledge, it's still there and it's perpetuated for that kid,
It's there for life,
So many. I read one the other day and I looked at every report that had gone into that, OT reports, speech and language report, every single one of them based on out-of-date autism theory. And then, of course, it goes to an admin person at the local authority who just copies and pastes and doesn't know, rightly or wrongly. I would say that is a really important job that needs to be trained properly. And then what we do is we put provision in place, and then even it might be a Senko sees that and says, well, I don't want to do all those things because I know better, but then they're accountable to that. So, it's messy, isn't it?
It's hard, isn't it, as well? And I think what we do is something that disregarded, or what people like us would be able to do, is because as much, even in schools, if they had to train and teach them what autism is, we teach them what autism means to them.
Yes.
And it's different, even saying it's different of knowing what autism is and knowing what autism is for you, because it's right knowing all of the symptoms and what can happen, and it all can relate to you. So you need to understand, with all that knowledge, how does that affect you?
Exactly.
And that's the gift that they don't give in school at all, because they don't even go as far as acknowledging it's even problematic to sit still. Let alone, am I going to say that it's just really affecting you in your life and you need to realise how you can work with it? No, we're not at that level.
And then I think that's where, when you think, why is nobody doing this? I'm just going to have to do it myself. I am pretty sure that our Being Me program is one of, if not the only program for allowing young people access to autistic people who are fully informed on current autism theory and neurodiversity theory, and opportunity to explore exactly that. There are some brilliant, one in particular, there's a brilliant on-demand approach that is fab. I've not accessed it myself, but I trust the people who have made it and I know it's brilliant. But, it shouldn't be that narrow. But equally, I don't want to encourage a load of people to try and recreate what we've done, because I absolutely know that what will happen is we've got a lot of people teaching children out of date things that are going to, make things worse.
And just to throw it out there as well, and just to be on the other side of it, there is a lot of people that could be saying they're an advocate or could be saying that they've got this, that not necessarily have the equipment to do it professionally, if that makes sense, or one or the
Yeah.
other. But I've come from a professional background, so I can do that with no real life experience, or have too much real life experience, but then can't personally. That goes into the professional. So it's
Yeah.
almost hard again, and it creates like another field, doesn't it, of where to go for the support.
I think it's really hard when you're a parent, especially when you're in the trenches and things are really, really difficult, to know where to go for help, what kind of help is actually going to have an impact, who to trust. Yeah, I think that's really, really difficult. And, and also when language, neurodiversity language is co-opted by people, so people just will call themselves neuroaffirming without actually understanding what that means or having done the
Yeah,
work.
I think I've got ADHD, but I'm just sitting on the fence. But I'm going to tell everyone for the next 10 years that I've got ADHD. And it's
Yeah.
almost like, it's not a thing to sit on the fence about. If you really had ADHD, you would get diagnosed. Like, I do understand the later generation when they get to the 50s, 60s, there's no point now when they realise it, because it's almost like I wouldn't want to do that, because it's like you lived a lie and that's confirming you've lived a lie, and I'd be fuming. So I can see that,
Mhm.
why that possibility. But other than that, like, you've got, yeah.
I think the people who are going to go out and educate, influence families' lives, children's lives, have got a moral responsibility to make sure that what they are doing is not going to be harmful. And I guess that loops us all the way back to what we talked about at the beginning with schools and that actual harm that's happening. What we don't want, I guess, to ever do that as well,
Yeah, that's what I mean.
And
Yeah,
so
there's risks of it. Yeah,
there's a
and that's why
real
we need to work together, isn't it? Because I said this in another podcast. We are not teachers. Like, well, you are. You definitely are. But like,
I'm not
we're most of
anymore.
every parent. But like, we did when you went to uni to do that, to study that. You've got those qualifications. We can't do what you do. We're not saying that.
Mm,
But you
mm,
also, as a said parent, can't do what we do. So in the middle somewhere is the perfect
yeah,
mix, isn't there, of getting it right? You would have thought because there is so much only a parent can do. And if you wanted your kid to be a doctor or be something like that, you couldn't. We couldn't do that. It's basic, very basic level. You could do it as a parent. That's what teachers for. But if you come together, you'd think you get just, it's just common sense that,
yeah,
give me a bit of your skills, give me a bit of my skills, and we can work together
yeah.
collaboratively.
Yeah, absolutely. That collaboration and remembering at the heart of it is a child or a young person who actually
Doesn't understand
everybody
what's going
should
on.
just want the best for.
Yeah,
And I know, and then there's conflicts over like different people's versions of what best means. But
yeah.
yeah, it's hard. And I think that, as I said, I admire people who are out there as particularly as autistic advocates who are really, really trying to work to change the education system from the outside, from the inside. I think those people are brilliant. I am too bruised by it at the moment to want to be able to do that, because I feel it all feels a bit futile, which for me is why putting my energy and my time instead feels more aligned with where I am, in terms of like, yeah, my own family situation, I guess, and just feeling, yeah, it's harm again, isn't it? Gosh, that's, yeah,
Mm.
feeling harmed by that system. So, yeah,
And
I mean, I
yeah.
just hope we can do good things for kids. Like we struggle with people finding us, and I think struggle with people recognizing that this type of support, that kind of peer support and self-understanding, that sort of thing is really impactful, and it may not be impactful immediately, but I think that what it does is it plants little seeds that can grow
Yeah.
over time, and I sat with a group of parents, Grove parents, last night. We just had a little kind of community gathering, and one of them really kindly said that Grove over the past year and her young person's accessed all three of our different things has been a lifeline to their family. To know that, yeah.
And
I
you'll be
mean, I was
surprised
going to
again.
say my work's done. It's not done, but you know what I mean.
I was surprised at the meet and greet of how many kids actually turned up, and it just showed me that the level of they don't even know who I am, like let alone
Yeah.
someone like Grove was already established. And I think it's really important. And I'm going to push parents as well if I can. I think what you do is amazing, and I think it's important. No, just to end it on it, for the parents, please do not say no to these sort of things because you think your kid will not like it. Because as
Yeah.
much as think you know your own child, you kind of restricting the option. You
Yeah.
don't know what's going to work for your child. All you can do is give them the options for places like Grove and places like online communities. I know they've been damaged with schools. I know they've been done all of that, but it doesn't mean that they don't want to learn and they don't want to be fully part of a community. And sometimes nerves can get the better of us, but just you'll be amazed about how much a kid will come out their shell just being on the camera with not even any purpose.
Yeah.
Where you'll think that's the worst thing they'll do. They won't even do that. Again, and I think people get confused with going on camera like they do at school to do the school work and stuff to what you kind of do specifically is
Yeah.
completely different. And I would advise everyone to go through Jess if they can, and people like her, because again, it's sense of worth. You can't, there's nothing that can pay for that about being belonging. And that's something that you can give in your community.
Yeah, it's those feelings, isn't it? You know, like when we first designed the Being Me course with our young team of young leaders and the other mentors, and we talked about how, you know, the young people who come through that probably won't remember like a huge amount of the information. Some of them will, some of them won't. But hopefully what will stay with them is a feeling of acceptance of themselves.
Yeah. And I'm going to, that was nice. Yeah. I want to come
And
back to that. Yeah.
yeah, and feeling like they can belong and feeling like there's a future for them as themselves, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I,
No.
I just think that those things are desperately important. So if you don't get it from us, if our approach is not right for your young person, find it somewhere else. But then, you know, spend time looking at what's below the surface of those organisations and what they are sharing with, because you're shaping your young person's self-concept,
Yeah.
or understanding of themselves. Like, have a dig around, because some of them, where they seem all glossy and lovely on the outside, actually what's on the inside is still deficit-based,
Yeah.
harmful perspectives on autistic experience, and that will influence how they interact with your young person. There's no doubt about that, because that's exactly what happens in schools. You know,
No.
that belief system penetrates absolutely everything that we do.
Yeah.
So it's no different anywhere else.
Yeah, a very good bit of advice. I think that's a nice way to kind of wrap up the podcast. I think that was a brilliant podcast. I'd happily have you gone again, but I think what we could do better than that is probably work together and create,
I'd love
again,
that.
even if it's something like promoting Grove in mind, you do like a Grove, I don't know, like a workshop that kind of filters
Yeah,
out other
yeah.
people
Oh,
to
I'd
go
love
through.
to come and do that. Yeah, that would be
Something
so.
like that, do you know what I mean? And I think the more, again, it's amazing you've already got that set up and stuff. And I know that already speaking to people in my app, that'll be very beneficial for some of their kids. And I can
I'm
imagine people on
so
Facebook and stuff.
So
So yeah,
happy to do that. Yeah, I would really, that would feel an enormous privilege to come and
yeah,
do that. So yeah, thank you so much for being on here, for what you're doing, like creating communities as well, Nathan. Honestly, it's amazing. So, you know, full respect to you for what you're doing as well.
oh,
It's
no, just
needed
right, it's
and
fine.
it's
Yeah.
appreciated.
Thank you very much. That's right, it's fine. Thank you for that. Don't be nice, but one of the positive thing as well to get, especially in our field, it's not very much like that, is it? You get lots of, well, fairly enough, crisis moments, don't
Yeah.
you? Where people, and you kind of, people don't really come back or say anything like that. So no, it's nice to hear. So thank you for that. Yeah.
I mean it. No, and I get that as well. Yeah, we experience that. But no, you know, you are valued. What you're doing is so impactful for people. So yeah,
It's
keep
okay.
on doing it. And yeah, thank you again for
That's
having me
it.
on. I really, really appreciate it.
No, it's a pleasure. And as I said, I'm looking forward to working
Yeah,
together in the future.
amazing. All right, awesome.